if they cite a study, what you have to look for is what is the date the study was published. Because what they used to look at was they thought the effects of being exposed to particulates was sort of a narrow band, like the first day or two when you're literally breathing this stuff. That's true, but what they've now found out is that a lot of the impact actually happens 5 or 7 days out. So a study that's published in 1990 or 1995 that looks at lung function or looks at incidence of heart attacks in relation to exposure to high air pollution only looked at this little narrow window, and they missed most of them. When you go back and you look at the current studies where they're looking at 5 or 7 days out, that's when a lot of the heart attacks happen. That's when a lot of the pulmonary disease, especially in adults, becomes manifest. Not right at the time of exposure, it's 5 or 7 days out. So old data, don't buy it. If it's not published in the last 5 years about particulates, don't believe it.
What is how does that happen? I mean, you're exposed to the pollution, and then what happens in the body that causes that 5 or 7 days out?
Basically, if we sat here and we all breathe the level of particulates for about 3 hours that the Florida DEP is going to allow this plant to produce, and we measure everybody's cardiorespiratory function in this room, everybody would show a significant decrease. So that's the immediate effect. What then happens is that they just assumed, my favorite word, assumed that that kind of went away. Right? It doesn't go away. And in fact, it lasts 5 or 7 days. So then, it's bad air. They put out a warning on the radio, the air quality is horrible. So you don't go out jogging that day. But you go out and you breathe this stuff. And then 3 days later, the air is kind of clearer. So well, I'll go out and do my 5-mile run or whatever. There you go. Because the physiologic effect didn't go away in 3 or 4 days.
So there's some weakness built up or something?
Well, it's still compromised. It affects this prostaglandin system, which has all kinds of control functions in your body. So if you actually measure function 3, 4, 5 days out after we've had you have this 3-6 hour exposure, it's still compromised. And then you go out and you stress yourself by doing whatever you're going to do. That's when you get the heart attack.
Okay. We're going to have exposure all the time.
Well, I know, and then the cumulative issue,
heart attacks all the time.
that's why with the kid issue, they're going to get asthma. It's not just going to make them sicker if they're already sick. It's going to take kids who are otherwise perfectly healthy, and they're going to be exposed over a long period of time to relatively higher levels. They will be made sick. I didn't know this stuff 3 or 4 years ago until we started looking at this. And again, with particulates, the knowledge that's accruing, people didn't know 5 years ago. Okay? But if you look, for instance, at the so-called NAAQS, the EPA standards, National Ambient Air Quality Standards, the papers all that data is based on are antiquated. So Florida DEP sits there and says, well, we're meeting EPA's NAAQS standards, so what? It's not current data. It's not applicable. That's why this paper I'm going to send to Jim you can distribute is from the American Heart Association, says that the levels which EPA thinks are acceptable are in fact a health risk. And if you got a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old who's going to be breathing this week after week, you can bet it's not acceptable for them. Not even close. The American Lung Association came out with an estimate last year, and it was that they estimate that the relative medical costs, just looking at pulmonary disease alone, out of these plants, if they get built over the next, I can't think it was next decade or whatever, is like $22 billion in healthcare costs. That's just out of pulmonary disease alone, not dealing with heart problems and lots of other stuff. And it just, the things go on and on and on. I do a lot of developmental work with kids now, and there are a couple of very disturbing studies that show that particulate matter exposure has definite impact on the cognitive function in school-age kids. So lots of things that we're looking at in terms of wondering where all this explosion of ADHD comes from. I'm beginning to wonder whether 2.5 doesn't have a lot to do with some of the kids who are starting to manifest certain kind of executive cognitive function deficits. May not be that they really have ADHD, but they may be breathing too much 2.5. So this is all stuff that's just beginning to come.